Okay. Can you all see those? Right, there we go. I sort of did studies based on the painting, and I did a more detailed, well, in fact, I thought this was, when I used the wax here, I just thought it was too rigid and didn't express the, you know, the form of the wall at all. And in fact, I've come around to the conclusion I'm not going to use wax at all because it's too hard, and I'd rather rely on my paintbrush and a bit of salt. So if you have got salt handy today, you can use it. If you don't want to, it doesn't matter. But as I went on, I feel I got more the feeling of the wall, and I literally just built it up and up and up, and layer and more layers, till I got this one, which I think was probably the most successful one in terms of describing the wall. And then I did these two little studies either side. And what I would say is, don't fill every last bit of your landscape in. Allow a little bit of the paper to be left so that there's some light coming through in the upper register of the painting itself. All right. I did do a quick version this morning. It's not bad. It's okay. But I just wanted to see what you would need to meet in your challenges. So for those of you that have already embarked on the painting, just bear in mind the things I've said. And there's just one last little thing I wanted to show you. In terms of a tree, you have its trunk, and then you get a branch. Can you see this, what I'm doing?
Yes.
Yes.
Is the line clear enough?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. When you get a branch coming off a tree, don't take it right from the edge of the trunk. Go inside the line and then bring it out. Okay? Because in fact, the tree, the branches grow from all around the tree. The tree is a cylinder, isn't it, with branches coming out in all directions. And so when you're actually painting or drawing a tree, bear that in mind, that it's, you know, that the branches are appearing in many places. And so if you bring that line down inside the trunk, it makes a better silhouette to the tree as you move up. Can you see that? And then, of course, the branches will also twist back on themselves underneath each other. You know, they don't all just go one on top of the other. You know, you can get them twisting over, and they get very fine towards the outside. And as I said earlier on, when I was just talking about in the PowerPoint, they divide and they become smaller and smaller as they reach the extremity of the tree. All right? So, you know, really think about this when you're actually painting. Don't just go into automatic or mechanical and think a tree is like that. It has two straight sides and the branches come out like that. I mean, I know this is, you know, the sort of stuff we do when we're children, but it's very easy to fall into that even as an adult, you know? So be aware that trees are graceful, beautiful forms, okay? And if you haven't practiced, I recommend it for the holidays, okay? So we'll get started. And okay, so I'm going to take the sky colour that I've mixed, which is essentially ultramarine and burnt sienna. I've made up a sort of bluey grey colour. I'll just show you like that. Can you see that colour? Yeah?
Yes.
Now, what I do with it when I come to paint is this. I basically put my brush into the colour that I've mixed, and I've got quite a, well, I'll show you. Sorry, it looks a right mess, but I've got this amount of that colour. And as I'm not going to wet the paper, but I'm going to put quite a lot of paint onto it. Initially, I'm going to leave a bit of white, don't get rid of all of it. And then I'm going to actually add water. So I'm really just painting with water and the colour that was on the paper, right?
Mm.
And I'll soften that off with my dry, clean brush. It's sort of literally, the edges, I'm going to use water on the edges of the colour so that it fades out. Can you see that? That was quite quick, wasn't it? Yeah?
Yeah.
And it'll dry a bit paler, so it should be fine. The next thing I did was to actually indicate this colour here, which is on the hillside, and it's slightly yellowy green. And again, quite pale, and I'm using lots of water with it, so it's not a strong colour. And I'm going to put it over those funny shapes on the top of the hill. You can always wash things off, remember, with your brush and clean water and the paper towel. So if you want to soften things even more, you can. This area here where the wall is, I think I'm going to use a similar colour over that as well. So it's a sort of pale bluey green. I've used aureolin and a tiny touch of Prussian blue to make the green. And over here, I'm going to use a different sort of colour palette. And in the middle, I'm going to fade it out on this path area. Now this is all going to get built up later on anyway, so at the moment it's just a base colour. Over here I think it's a bit more like a yellow ochre on this left-hand side. So I'm using a bit of raw sienna or yellow ochre, whatever you happen to have handy. So it's warm, that left-hand foreground, quite warm. Right. And then the brown, which I've pre-mixed, which is ultramarine and burnt sienna. I'm using now I'm going to start to put the tree trunks in, and I'm going to do it sort of, and I'd like you to watch while I do this, but before I do it, I'm going to mix the colour. If it helps, I'm just going to use some Prussian blue, which I've got over here, and I'm going to put burnt sienna with it, and it makes a nice dark, cool brown, provided you don't put too much burnt sienna in it. Okay, whoops, there we are. Now, can I just show you something? If you just watch for a minute, I'm going to start with this right-hand tree here. Now, if I just push it on, you know, from my brush, it's quite heavy and quite dark to start off with. So I'm going to use a combination of paint and another brush, and I'm going to soften that colour so that, like I said earlier on, one side of the tree is going to appear a little bit lighter than the other, and it softens the colour before I'm ready to start sort of putting it in too strongly. I'm going to keep it fairly sort of loose and light to start off with. The trees on the right, I would say, have quite a considerable amount of colour in them, but the trees behind, which are further away, are much bluer. So I'll use a completely different colour for those. So I'll get the ones in the foreground in first, and then I'll put the bluey ones in. Now, you remember what I said about one side being darker than the other? Because I want to get this right-hand side a bit lighter, I'm going now in just with water and pulling the colour, just a little bit of it, across into the other side of the tree. So it's not a solid brown tree, is what I'm trying to say. All right. So use a combination of a wet brush with just water to soften shapes and a brush with the brown pigment on to actually put the colour in. And think about all those little twisty branches that you can bring into this. They're very, get some fine ones in as well as the thicker ones. Remember the practice we did in the summer, those of you that came to Kew. I often find that just drawing with the brush with the water on it, it picks up some of the colour, and there's enough there just to make a nice soft statement, like these little twiggy branches here. So it's not, it's paler as they go out, which helps to get the fineness of them across. Actually, it does work doing that with the end of the brush. You can actually pull those little branches across, from the wet paint, if you do it quickly enough. While the paint is still wet in this dark one here, I'm going to introduce a bit of Prussian blue on top, so that I'm pushing it into the wet paint, and it's quite nice. You sort of just drop it in and let it fuse into that wet paint underneath. Okay, it looks very dark looking at it in here, but in the screen, it's not as dark in the real thing.